And I was trying to like look through it and I'm thinking, this sounds familiar, but I can't exactly tell where it's from. And so I just type in the URL, okay, dork, right? And it redirects to Noah's blog. And I realized, yeah, Noah used to call his blog, okay, dork.
Oh,
And so,
wow. I didn't know.
that's how I realized, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Then I get an email from Noah, like his personal email now. And he's like, hey, can I get the deep dive? And this is the day before. So I'm like, what do I say? Like, do I give him
Oh,
the deep
wow.
dive early or like, what do I do? So I was like, I just stuck to it. I was like, yeah, hey, Noah, it's coming out tomorrow. I'll make sure you get it. And so the newsletter goes out and within like 10, 15 minutes, Noah replies.
Before we dive into today's episode, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us grow and inspire more people on their journeys. Thank you.
Hello, Sheldon. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Hey, Thomas, yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me on and looking forward to getting going.
So, Sheldon, for those who don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Cool. I'm Sheldon. I've known you for a while now on LinkedIn. I think it's a lot of how I've been meeting friends recently, or should I say, like people in the entrepreneurship space is through LinkedIn. And I suppose that's a good place to explain my journey. Is I started this journey on LinkedIn. I've always had a passion for entrepreneurship, specifically like that early stage, the 0 to 1, getting an idea and making it something. That's always something that I've really been passionate about. From back in school when it's going to sound cliche, but I was like the kid who sold sweets and snacks and drinks. And then eventually I like upgraded that to, I don't know if you know Match Attacks, like the Premier League trading cards, like those Premier League trading cards. I used to collect those and I even made like a trading and like selling business. Like I'd repackage them into my own packets. Like, so I've always been doing things like this. And I think it stems from my mom as well. She's been an entrepreneur for most of my life. And I've seen like the power it has and I've seen like what it takes. And so that's how it started. And then as I got older, I always kept this interest. I kept doing things, selling toasted sandwiches at my boarding school and these sort of things. And then I suppose my first taste in private equity because we tripled our money when we sold the business from what we bought it for. And then, so after I went to university, I always had the idea that I wanted to go and do my own thing.
And sorry, did you actually study entrepreneurship or business at uni?
So it's a bit different in South Africa. I'd say like business isn't really a common degree, but I would say like I did a business degree, what we call is like a commerce degree. And so I did economics. Actually, I did economics with law. The original plan was like, oh, let me go do and become a lawyer. I think a lot of people really told me that throughout my life, like, oh, you'd be a great lawyer. I was just someone who talked a lot and did debating. So like that's the path that older people tell you, right? It's like you talk a lot, you do debating, go be a lawyer. So I think that had kind of been in my head. And so I went to do that. But I enjoyed some of it, but to be honest, it wasn't for me. And I realized that. And so I must be honest, maybe this isn't a good example, but I never really took university. Like it wasn't my main priority, right? I had other businesses on the side. I usually tried drop shipping, right? It was the height of drop shipping when I was getting into it. I had some extra money. I was tutoring and then realized this is actually a tough business. Like it's not how people say it online. You know, you need capital is the end of the day. You need to test ads, test products.
So you're saying it's not like when people advertise on YouTube to start drop shipping business?
Not at all. But I feel like when I was getting into it was like the height of this. Like everyone was saying, do drop shipping. And so I tried and I kept failing. And the main problem was coming back. It's like I just didn't have the ad budget to spend. Even when I chose what they call like a winning product, I would kind of break even because you're still testing how to optimize the ads. And I didn't have enough money and like my payback cycles weren't quick enough to keep reinvesting. And so I stumbled across the idea of how do I get my acquisition costs down, right? That became my main priority. It's like I still wanted to do it. I could see like some signs that it was working. I made a sale here and there, but I just didn't have the money to really go at it. And so there was this YouTuber, Bia Heza, I think was his name, I came across long ago.
Yeah, I think I've seen him as well.
Yeah, I don't know if he still posts, but back then he used to run Instagram theme pages. Like, you know, those pages that post it's not themselves, it's like other content, right?
Yeah, like faceless, right?
Faceless, yeah. It's like, I suppose like faceless automation YouTube nowadays. It was like Instagram back then. And so I got into that and I really started enjoying it. First, I made my own content. Then I just started repurposing like other content. And after a while, like people wanted to sponsor themselves or like products on my page before I even went back to dropshipping, like $5 here and there. And I was like, this is actually like a good business model in itself, right? Like you don't necessarily need to go to the dropshipping where you have to test everything. There's still that element to it. And I have something that's working here, so let me double down on it. So I realized I had an NBA page, like American basketball.
Wow.
But my thought was, it's too hard to monetize because products at the end of the day are trademarked and copyrighted.
Oh, yeah.
And so I sold the page. Like that's a big business that was going on at the time. It's like buying and selling Instagram pages. And so
sorry to interrupt, but was it worth it for the price that you sold it? Was it like a good price?
I think I can't remember too much, but I remember getting a good deal because it wasn't that big. It was only like 10 to 20,000 followers. And I was like, in the hundreds of dollars. I can't remember exactly, to be honest. This is 6 years ago or so.
Yeah.
But I was happy with it. I was a university student. I was like, this is an extra bit of money I can use for other things, right? Other businesses. And so, but the intention then was for me I went to like more, like, should I say, high ticket or like easier to monetize niche. So like the luxury niche, right? Which was posting nice watches, nice cars, houses, those sort of things. And I blew the page up. Like,
really?
Look, in I got to 100,000 followers in 9 months, like just under 9 months.
Wow. And sorry,
this
was
was
it
before
like
Reels?
posting images daily, images that you found online?
Exactly, yeah. So I think I didn't do much, to be honest. I just knew how to like play the game, which at the time, and I think this is true for every social media when it's prioritizing organic engagement, which is you need to be consistent. Like the platforms rarely reward consistency. They show you to more people. You get better at figuring out what works. So not only does the platform reward you, but you actually become better at it.
Yeah.
And so I was posting 3 posts a day, and like multiple stories a day. I did this every day. Like I didn't miss a single day. And I would engage with other people's posts. Not so much as I think that's more important now, and depending on the platform like Twitter and LinkedIn, that's super important. But Instagram wasn't too much, maybe at the beginning.
Did you do online advertisement as well?
No ads. This was all organic.
Wow.
No.
Nice, yeah.
It's like some shout out for shout outs, but I didn't pay for anything to grow. And then along that journey, I started getting clients, or I got my first client for like social media management. And I was like, okay, this is a cool business now. So I have this page, which is also generating me money because people are advertising on it. And at this stage, I'm charging like $50 a story, right? So it's relatively good money, especially for someone in university. So I don't know, I'm making something like $200, maybe a bit more a month. And then I'm getting these social media clients. And so things are going up. And then about a year later, or a few months later, COVID hits, right? And and I don't know what it was like for people listening, but in South Africa, it was very strict lockdown, and for a while.
From my experience in Europe, in the beginning, it was very strict as well, because people didn't really know what is happening, how it's going to evolve, so it was strict as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that strictness, it was really prolonged in South Africa, and so all the clients I had actually were like in-person businesses, and particularly like high movement. Like, not to get into the details, like one of the clients, for example, was like a Wi-Fi provider, like hotspots, public hotspots. And I mean, that completely goes away when no one can leave the house, let alone congregate. And so all the clients in like a matter of weeks fall away, right? And so does my business.
But
I started the page, luckily.
At the same time, I understand what you said, but wouldn't it also be benefit if people are locked at home and use more of internet and social media, or it's not correct?
Yeah, so I agree. I think a lot of businesses really benefited from it. And maybe not, let me say my business died, but all the clients I had were gone. So the revenue was reset back to zero because their businesses were gone. And look, there's nothing much you can do as an agency or like a service provider if your client doesn't adapt or change to it, right? So say they'd come up with something new or innovative, cool, now we can work together still. But if their decision is to stop, there's nothing much you could do.
Yeah.
And so I still had the page. So I still had I was still making some money, and I still had a base, had case studies, etc. But then what ended up happening is I got an offer. I would get offers often, and I wouldn't really listen to them. But to sell this luxury page, it was quite a good offer, and I thought, okay, let me see if I can push the price up a little bit, something I'm happy with. I didn't want to take advantage. I just wanted to find a price that I thought was fair. And so eventually, with some negotiation, we get to a price. Now this one was a lot better than the other one. I still think I was underpriced, but it was something like 2,000, 2,500. I mean, I like to share, I think it's good for people to know numbers. I don't want to seem like I'm bragging, but
no, it's good
helps,
if you.
I think.
I would actually ask you out of curiosity, but I'm not sure if it will be appropriate. So if you share it, it's only a good thing.
Yeah. So I think I sold for something like $2,500. It's a lot, it's a decent bit of money for just an asset, right? Again, I think it's undervalued looking at it now, and sometimes I regret selling it. But what I did with that was what really helped is the people I sold it to actually ran the biggest real estate social Instagram page at the time. I think it's still the biggest. So
like in South Africa or
no, in the world.
Oh,
so
really?
it's called Luxury Listings. I think they have something like 3 point something million followers now. And so they were looking to to form this big conglomerate media agency with Instagram pages. And so I didn't even realize at the time. And this is who now I sold it to. So I ended up working with them for a while, which was really cool and interesting. And so I learned a lot, right? I was running the page. I was working with them, getting to speak to them, hear them out on their ideas, how they did things. And eventually, I think the way they saw the business kind of differed in the leadership. I don't really know what happened, but I could see things weren't, I don't know if things were working out the way they'd hoped. So I decided to step away and basically replicated what I'd learned there in South Africa, which is I built the South African real estate page, a South African real estate page. At the time, I think there was only one other person doing it. Again, I grew this, I think I still have the page. I grew to 120 something thousand followers.
That's kind of
off of that, especially considering it's one country focus, it was a bit slower. But look, nice houses sell themselves, and South Africa has really beautiful homes. It's quite renowned for its architecture. And if you think about Cape Town, I'm not sure. I mean, people listening might not be aware, but Cape Town's super scenic and beautiful, and it's really cheap compared to the rest of the world, per square meter. In South Africa, yes, it's relatively expensive for a South African, but when you compare it to other major tourist hotspots, it's affordable.
Although I've never been there, but I did research, especially after speaking with Matt in one of the previous episodes, and it really looks beautiful, and I'm excited to visit one day as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome, right? You should visit. I think I was born in Joburg, but I live in Cape Town now. I think both cities have their pros, but Cape Town is really beautiful. And it is it has world-class city traits, there's good infrastructure, a lot of parts in some parts, and yeah, it's really beautiful. I mean, there's mountains, the ocean.
Penguins.
Yeah, exactly. The penguins on the beach.
And also from what I heard, is it kind of startup hub of South Africa or Africa?
Yeah, so Cape Town is definitely the hub of South Africa. And I say Cape Town because it's more there's another city close to Cape Town called Stellenbosch, which is the winelands. Mm-hmm. Let's say that's 40 minutes away. That's the hub. Those two cities, I would put them together and say that's a hub. Mm-hmm. I think Cape Town's growing to become even bigger by itself. And Joburg is massive because there's just more institutional money. So there's more of the funds are here in Joburg, and more the banks are headquartered in Joburg. And so there's more investment to go around. So by that virtue, it's bigger in Joburg as well. But I'd say the more typical startup scene, you feel that in Cape Town. You don't really feel it too much in Joburg.
And can I ask you, as someone who's never been there, and I've got opinion from the news or from what I read, is it truth, or to what extent is it true that Johannesburg is, or to me it seems like a dangerous place? Obviously not everywhere, but I feel that's how social media often portrays it. Is that true or not?
Yeah, look, so wait, I'll answer that now. I just want to go back to the startup hub question. Something I want to add is I think South Africa still, what South Africa is very stable in terms of investment. Whereas you get other hubs around Africa, like Nairobi, Kenya, and Lagos and like Lagos, Nigeria, and Cairo in Egypt, which often have more, should I say, of a startup scene in terms of like capital spent, valuations. Like there's no unicorn that's come from South Africa yet. There's unicorns from Nigeria, right? And like specifically in Lagos. But what you see is like on downturns, South Africa stays stable, whereas these other countries tend to go more cyclical.
Yes.
And I think that's like a big pro for South Africa, but it is still a lot for South Africa to like internationalize compared to these other markets. But going back to Joburg, yeah, look, South Africa, there's going to be places that aren't safe, but realistically you can avoid them. Like you don't have to be in an unsafe environment. Yeah, maybe it's about more being aware of your environment, like just keeping an eye on your phone and these sort of things. And I always say it's like, I'm lucky I've never had anything happen to me, like no harm, no rob, like nothing's ever happened to me. But again, that's not all I know friends who've had things happen to them. Like I've had my girlfriend's phone got pickpocketed, but I mean, that happens around the world, right?
I mean, it would happen in London, I guess, like
exactly,
on a regular day.
So those things, like, look, there is violence, like crime, like violent crime. Specifically, South Africa is like a big gender-based violence issue. So like women, it's very unsafe for women, especially compared to the rest of the world. But in the general, like if you come as a tourist, you can avoid all the more dangerous areas.
And do you feel like that it's improving or not, or it's staying the same?
Look, that's an interesting question. I don't know. Wait, are you talking about just specifically safety or like general economic outlook?
It was more towards the safety, but you can answer both.
Okay.
I'll be curious about both.
I don't know if it's just how I've perceived it, but I would say it's been safer. I don't know the stats, right? I don't know, so I can't actually say. In terms of like general economic view, so let's see. I think South Africa is in an interesting situation because, I mean, most people aren't going to know this, but we've had the same government for like since we came out of apartheid, right? So the ANC has been the ruling party since 1994. And this is the first year where it's coalition is the wrong word, but like a government of national unity. So there's multiple parties who are ruling. And so, look, I don't know if it's going to be better, if it's going to be worse, but I think it's at an interesting time where there seems to be more incentive, even before the government, like the ANC were already introducing more privatization, which in my opinion is a good thing in the circumstances that we have here. So yeah, I'm hopeful is the answer.
And maybe one more question, talking about South Africa. What is it like in Pretoria?
Why do you ask about Pretoria?
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it one of the capital cities?
Yeah. So it is the capital, but it's actually like, I would say it's like Joburg, but a bit smaller and less developed. So it's more like constitutional capital. So it's like where the government sits. So it's some parts are nice. It's just like Joburg. I'll just say it's like a bit smaller and like less. I don't want to say developed might be the wrong word, but like less big city than Joburg.
And is there something funny about it? Because when I ask you, I don't know. Based on
it's
reaction.
Just like I think it's just like it's always like this. It is the capital. Like South Africa has 3 capitals, which is Pretoria, Cape Town, and Bloemfontein. But personally, I don't know how Bloemfontein stole the spot as a capital. But so the Bloemfontein one, I think, is where the Constitutional Court lies. So it's like more legislative, and that's why it's the capital. But Pretoria as well, it's just always been funny to me. It's like it's not the biggest city. It's not even the second biggest. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested in geography, so I always like to discuss this stuff, and especially when it's somewhere I haven't been to. So just was curious.
What I'd say about Pretoria is like you get jacaranda season, which is so beautiful. So there's these they're called jacaranda trees, and they're purple, and they line the streets all over. So it gets really beautiful when it's jacaranda season, which I think is only for like a few weeks every year, though.
So then, coming back to your entrepreneurial journey, I wonder, have you finished the university in the end, or did you become entrepreneur?
So I ended up finishing. So how it generally works, Cypher, is you do like a 3-year degree, and then you do a year of honors, and then only a master's, right? So it's a bit different to the rest of the world. But I stopped after the 3 years. So I stopped after 3 years.
Is it because you didn't really see a reason in continuing, or why?
Yeah, exactly. I think there were a few reasons, right? I was at this point where I had now, so going back to the Cypher real estate page, I built that up to where I had a few clients, real estate clients now specifically, where I was doing like social media work, like the content creation, more specifically like ads as well. And so it wasn't like big enough yet that I was super comfortable to not look for a job. And also, I think a lot of me was like, the traditional path is you just get a job. Let me just continue doing this on the side, right? And then also, like, do I do an additional year of my studies? And I got a job offer. So I had interviewed at certain places, and one of them was for like a management consulting, like a boutique firm here. And I got the offer. I mean, the truth is you get 7 days to respond to the offer. So I just said yes. And that's the reality, is like, I wasn't sure really what exactly I wanted to do in the next year. In some parts of me, like as much as I had my own business, I wasn't particularly enjoying it. Like I think, and I don't think I don't think you have to enjoy a business, but I don't know if that's what I wanted. I think I wanted to find something that I really was passionate about and wanted to do. And was prepared to put like the next 10 years into. And this, I just don't think was it. And so that was probably swaying me a bit. Do I sometimes regret not just giving it a go? Yeah, I don't know if I regret, but I think I could have made it work. But I went down the path of continuing on the side and then going into consulting, which it was a tough decision, a tough outcome, because consulting is very demanding. And I was still doing this on the side. So I did it, but then I ended up just like winding down the contracts of like all my clients. So I kept the ones that I suppose were less work by hours, that I had like better relations with, and then kept going less and less. But what I still ended up doing was like touring homes. I still did that stuff because I found I enjoyed it. And so I was still working with clients with that. And what I would also work on like a referral basis. So if I ever referred someone who ended up purchasing, I would get a commission.
So you're basically working in this consultancy and at the same time running your business on the side.
Yeah, exactly.
Wasn't it time consuming?
It is time consuming. Yeah, it is. That's the answer. I worked a lot. I still do, because I'm still actually working in consulting.
Because you said it is. So my next question was if you actually still continue doing both.
Yeah. So there's still, I suppose, I'm a bit, I don't know. I don't really know if I have the answers to this. I don't think I do. I mean, I'm just someone like a person, but I think it's important for me that like I feel very financially stable and when I decide to like go full time. And sometimes I think, yes, it's good to put your back against a wall and there's no other option but to make it work. And I think that can work. And I think it could work for me, and I think it works for other people. But I also at the same time is like, I do have this job, and my like employers have been like open to accommodate me working on things on the side. And I also then I'm like work flexibly in Cape Town, come to Joburg when needed. So I have these things, like it's like a good relationship in terms of allowing me to work on the business.
Yeah, like,
and I think the company, exactly, like the company I work for is most people do something. Like one of my team members has an app for like a productivity app. Another one runs a tutoring company. So everyone's doing things. And so I think it still benefits me from that perspective. I also changed my perspective in how I think about my job in relation to my business, where it's like, if you think about a typical startup, is often at the beginning, they do like agency work or like other bootstrap, like any scrappy work to make money so that they can focus on the main thing. Now, for me, my main thing now is my like founder-led marketing business, right? So that is the main thing for me. And I work with that, and I'm still busy refining my offering and everything. And I got my first client earlier in the year, and now my second one we're in the process of about to onboard. And so like I'm working slowly to a place where I feel comfortable enough.
Yes.
But how I view the job is also, this is almost like that scrappy way to make money, where it's like, and I don't mean it in a scrappy way. I mean, like, it's a revenue generator for the business.
Yeah,
So
of
now I
course.
can spend more money on, for example, if I wanted to hire someone,
To work with.
or if I wanted to, yeah, exactly, to work with me, I can use all the tools without worrying about like expenses. I can use it, and I don't think you need that. So I don't want to like encourage people to say like, oh, you need to wait for these things. It's just, I was in the situation and I realized this is what I want to do.
Yeah,
So for me,
based
it's
on your
working out like that.
circumstances.
Exactly right. So it's like I reframed it as, this is funding my business, and it's just one of those things that like you do as a startup, and this is the way that I'm funding it, and that's how I view it.
Do you know then, or have you got plans over time to focus fully on your own business?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, like I was mentioning, I have the first client, second one's on the way. Look, I don't want to say too much, but like the income is almost being replaced already. And so for me, once I'm like, let's say 60, 70% there, I'm happy to go, and even maybe a bit less, I'll have to see. But it's very much, it is the plan. It's like, I think everyone here at my work knows it as well. It's like, I want to do my own thing, and it's very clear.
Mhm.
But while I'm here, I still think it's right to give everything and like work hard and do what's expected. But also it's good to know like, okay, for me, it's like going into entrepreneurship is the goal.
Yes.
And so I've been working to get to that point. And yeah, I think that the thing with entrepreneurship is like, it's hard and it gets glamorized often, and rightfully so. Like, there are so many upsides and so many benefits to it. But for me, it's not just hard in terms of like skills or ability. Like, it's hard like emotionally and mentally as well, where you just have to learn how to deal with rejection very well.
Yeah.
Because if you can't, it's not going to be an enjoyable journey.
And how to deal with all kinds of people, like
Exactly,
literally.
right. And the thing is like, exactly, like so many people, like you work with different clients, and there's things that work for one and don't work for the other. And I think also like a trait of entrepreneurs is probably that, you guessing is that a lot of entrepreneurs overthink things, or like are pretty hard on themselves. So if something doesn't work, it's almost like, oh, I should have done that better, I need to do better. And I think that's a good attitude, that you want to do better. But I think often it's like beating yourself down rather than lifting yourself up, and that
Mhm.
generally makes it worse. Like the approach I've taken now recently is, it's just like, what happens happens, and you need to just learn. So I've even like have learnings now that I use Notion, and I have this database now, so it's just like learnings. So say onboarding a client, what didn't go well here, what could go better next time, what makes it easier for me, what makes it easier for the client. It's just like, whenever I think of little lessons through my experience, I write it down, because you don't know what you don't know until
Yeah.
you do. And so like, one thing I think recently that I think it's a lesson for anyone, especially in like a service business, is get people to pay their invoice as soon as possible. And
Don't
I know
chase
I
it
don't mean it
after.
exactly. I don't mean it from the perspective of they won't pay eventually, because I think people have said that, but in my experience, generally people have paid even later. But I mean it from the perspective of, you need to get buy-in straight away. And when people pay you, they're much more willing to have time for the call,
Yeah.
to, if it's a review based agency, to review your work straight away.
Mhm.
Whereas if there hasn't been any payment, it's like, oh, we can delay this, kick it down the
Yeah.
road, or
It's like a
get it.
commitment.
Exactly right. It's like
Yeah.
just a physical commitment where the business feels, okay, we've paid for this, we need to take it seriously. And so like,
Mhm.
that's just something I've learned recently. And look, I think you could have seen it coming, but also when you're starting a business, it's like, you just want to say yes and make sure that the customer's happy and everyone's happy. But you also need to figure out like, this is actually in the best interest of the customer as well, and your client. Is like, sometimes like what's easy isn't the best way for them. And similar, and it's not just for entrepreneurs, like anyone in a job as well. It's like, often, especially in what I do in consulting, is you have to push back on the client, because at the
Mm.
end of the day, what's right is the intellectually honest answer, not what someone wants. And to get there, you need conflict along the way. Most of the times is,
Mhm.
you're not going to agree. And the point is like, I like this idea of strong opinions, but loosely held. When we believe in something, like we believe in it, like this is the way we're going to do it, and you need to be full commitment. But if you get information that can change that, don't wait or don't hold on to an ego, like a loss. You need to change.
Yeah.
And so like that's the best way, from my opinion, to get like the best outcome, which gets you the best, like which clients feel the best, which then they get the best results, which means you get better business, like more business, you get referrals, you get case studies. And so, yeah, these are things you just learn along the way. There's a quote, I think I heard it from Sean Puri, you know, the founder of Milk Road. He's the My First Million
And
podcast.
podcast. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, exactly. The My First Million. He's like, I don't know if he said it or someone said it, but I heard it from him, where it's like, to be an entrepreneur, you just have to be willing to put yourself in more uncomfortable situations than anyone else. And like that is what it's about. Like sales is uncomfortable. Whether you're a pro or new, it's like, it's uncomfortable. You just have to do it. You're asking for feedback from someone who's not happy. You have to do it. It's uncomfortable. Like it's just all these things where it's like uncomfortable moment. And the more you can get comfortable with that uncomfortability, I think the higher your chance of success becomes.
Yeah, of course. I completely agree. It's not easy. It's not something that you really want to do, but the best way how to learn, how to get the feedbacks from your mistake, especially so that you don't repeat it again. I can only agree with you. And I was just about to add that when you spoke about basically speaking with clients, that I'm not saying that you should argue, but you don't be afraid to say the opposite opinion or not to say yes to everything that the client says, because you also need to think about what is realistic, if you get paid enough, because client can have huge visions, but is it actually doable? Is it doable with the time frame, with the budget? Are we going to stress about it in the end? Is it worth it actually? So there are a lot of questions, and it's not as easy as it may seem like.
Yeah, exactly.
And also you said a great point before, I think it was that people often talk about, I don't know, entrepreneurship, that it's easy or something in that sense, because it's also quite easy to see success stories on social media and everywhere. So then you tend to compare yourself to others, maybe think that it's easy or something like that. And especially you don't see the whole story of what people post there.
Yeah.
So it's something that I try to remind myself not to compare yourself to others. That would be just my piece of advice.
Yeah, exactly. I think comparison's a tricky one, because I think it can help when you use it to motivate yourself. But when you do that, it's like very tricky, because you don't want to use it to like look as like, look where they are and I'm only here. It's like you want to look at it as, oh, they can do it, I can do it too. So let me get up there.
Yeah.
I think like keeping that balance is quite hard. But yet, like you're saying, you don't see success gets shouted about. And people talk about success. And people do talk about failures, I'll be honest, but that's generally once they're successful. So you only really hear about it from successful people. And the thing is, maybe people who fail do talk about failures, but they don't get seen as much because they don't have this platform that successful people do. So you really only see like success stories, and then like they say they had all these hardships at the beginning, but it's not as real as someone who's actually had the hardships and hasn't had the success yet.
Obviously, such a person wouldn't be posting about it.
Exactly right. And I think for me, it's like recently, I've been thinking about this, like the idea of luck, and like this has been a big topic for me. Is like how much of what you do is luck, and how much is it you? And I'm not sure the answer, but for me, it's I think the big parts of luck have already occurred in your life, like complete luck. Whereas where you were born, like who your parents were, your genetics, these sort of things, like everything related to your birth. Like, I mean, there's like huge passport privilege, which is like determines a lot of people's lives, like your class of your parents. Those things have happened, right? Some of the only examples I can think of like pure luck, where there's no influence around it. There's nothing you could have done, you as a person. Everything else, I think, is like, I've been thinking of it, is it just not increasing your shots on goal? Where you're not relying on luck. There's still luck involved in everything. But like if you take enough shots, it is like in football, expected goals. Eventually your expected goals exceeds one.
Yeah.
All you need to make it big is one shot that goes in. And I think I've been thinking more as like, how do you just keep, I see this as entrepreneurship as like taking shots. Like you just take shots and shots and shots, and maybe every time you learn something, so you take it at a better angle, closer to the goal, and eventually like you're bound to score. I think another way of thinking about it is, again, I'm stealing from Sean here again, but I think he stole this from someone else, so it's like this whole loop. But but it's like everyone looks for a silver bullet, but in reality, that you're never going to find it. What you need to do is like, and actually this might have been Alex Hormozy, I can't remember, but what you need to do is keep shooting lead bullets, and eventually like one will just be silver. Like you don't intend to shoot the silver bullet. You just keep doing, like consistently showing up for yourself, doing the things you need to do, cold emailing people, DMing people, doing sales, doing calls, and eventually like the silver bullet will just come out. And rather than looking for it, just start shooting the other ones.
Yes. Yeah, I like it. And I often, or not often, but try to think about it that, for example, there is this quote, I think it's from Edison, that he didn't fail, but he found 100 ways that didn't work. So basically, you never know if 100 first can be the one. So I can, for example, stop today, and I don't know if I would succeed tomorrow. I don't have to, but at the same time I can. So it's like you never know. Yeah, I can agree with you. I like it.
Are you looking to elevate your online presence? Check out Trailblazed, our digital marketing agency. Whether it's standing out on social media, crafting a stunning new website, or developing impactful visuals, Trailblazed has got your back. Visit trailblazed.digital and reach your online potential today.
And I know, Sheldon, that you've got really good newsletter. Do you want to tell us more about it? Introduce it. Why did you start it? What is it about?
Yeah, cool. So I run a newsletter called the 0 to 1, where essentially I give you the tactics that you need to grow, or like the tactics you can replicate that have been proven from the world's leading startups that you can use to grow your business, right? So I spend 20, 25 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less, researching ClickUp, AppSumo, Morning Brew, these startups that have seen like massive success, both in terms of growth and revenue and profit. And then I distill that down into, the newsletter's changed a bit over time. And I think this is again another like learning from what I've learned, like doing the newsletter, is that I used to distill this like long story. It was more longer form, like how they grew and then the tactics and like how you can replicate. But now I focus one specific topic each week. It's like, here's one tactic that chess.com used, for example, to grow. And it's I try to make it very practical. So like, I started off with like, if you don't have time, there's a section which is basically just the key takeaway. So if you don't have time, you can read this section.
Yeah, I like it. I subscribe and I appreciate it because sometimes they obviously want you to read the whole thing, but maybe you want to find out first if you're going to enjoy it, if it's something for you or not. So I appreciate that you add this part.
I'm glad to hear that. I think also my thinking was, my target audience is entrepreneurs and like more, I would say, busier people. So they don't have tons of time to read a 3, 4, 5,000 word email. Even now, how I do it, which is like 600 words, it's like they don't always have the time. So if I just add like a little snippet, they know every week they can take like one short thing away, which takes a minute to read. Then I've done my job there, and they're probably more likely to read the rest as well. And so I lead that with the like key takeaway, and then I go into like, what is the tactic, and here's how it's working. So like, here's the 3-step process essentially to how it's working. So like practical example, and one that I really enjoyed doing, which is chess.com. I did my research. Essentially, the tactic I wanted to write about, it excites me. I'm big in the creator economy as well. Is like how chess.com uses partnerships to grow their business, almost in like a growth loop flywheel type way. And what I mean by this is like, to practically break it down, is they use at the top of the funnel these like massive celebrities, your athletes, like Luka Doncic has his own promotion with chess.com, right? Jaylen Brown, Larry Fitzgerald, so these big athletes, there's musicians, and this is getting people in who don't necessarily play chess. So they have never played before. They see Luka, their favorite basketball player, playing. okay, let me try chess.com.
Mm.
Then what they do is they have the second layer, which is like people who are beginners, but like more, they're into the idea of like things around chess. And what this can be is like Queen's Gambit, right? So they watch Queen's Gambit. Well, what does
Yeah.
chess.com do? They make a partnership with Queen's Gambit so you can play against Beth, which is the main character, at different ages. They work with streamers, right? Who do like chess championships, like Ludwig. So he runs a chess championship. You get the biggest creators in the world, or some of them, and they do a chess tournament. And yeah, I might not watch chess, but I watch Ludwig. So when he puts this on, I'm sort of interested, but like, and so that's more like in this middle tier. And then the bottom tier is people who love chess, is people who play chess. And that's when you get your like Hikaru's, so your actual chess players, like Hikaru, Magnus, your chess YouTubers, so your Levi's, like Gotham Chess. So, and how what I think is really smart about it is it's like it attracts people into this ecosystem and keeps them there. So you get, let's say someone is a fan of Luca. So they see Luca, they start playing. Now they're kind of into chess, right? Or maybe they even see Luca, they don't necessarily start playing straight away, but they like watch the Queen's Gambit. And so every step like gets you closer and like further down the funnel. So you start playing and now you see, okay, chess.com are hosting with Ludwig a championship. So you go, okay, let me watch that. And now you like move down a layer, right? You're more into chess now. And then after that, it's like, okay, I want to get better at chess. So there they've given you there's tools on the platform, which I think it's a great app. But then it's also like you start watching YouTube, right? So now you're in that final tier. You're watching these professional chess players play chess, and it just feeds like back into itself. Where then you want to play against your friend, right? And it's a network, like it's almost a network issue where it's like you can only play against people on the platform, and so they start speaking to their friends, and then like the loop continues, and the more like chess actually grows as a sport, the bigger this gets. And I think chess.com had this like very distinct, we grow within chess, to now they grow chess, the game. They grow the game, whereas so that's these partnerships with athletes and different, like Supercell is another example. So like Clash of Clans, they did a collab Clash of Clans with Duolingo, like they're growing the game, not just their app. And so like as they grow the game, that essentially grows them, like it increases the amount of people who fall down the funnel. And yeah, I think it's awesome strategy.
And how do you select topics? Maybe what companies, what like specific topics you're going to write about?
So again, it's changed a bit now that I've gotten shorter, but I want to go back to the original way, which is I just look at companies that interest me. So the first deep dive I ever did was Stan, create a tool for creators to make money online, right? It's an awesome business. Like they're super good product. Like the marketing is fantastic. And the founder does an awesome job as well as founder-led marketing on YouTube. Like his personal brand is really strong, open, authentic. So I find a company that I'm interested in, or that I've used a product, or that I've seen the founder online or someone online and it's sparked my interest, right? So I'd usually pick a company first. And what I want to go back to doing is like a blank slate. Whereas I don't go into it with any preconceived like idea of the strategy, the growth strategy they used. Because my last few ones I've been doing that where it's like, oh, I've seen Zapier uses SEO content really well.
I remember that one. I enjoyed it. It was a good one.
Yeah. So I'd have seen that they did that, and I was like, let me write about that, right? And while I think it works, like you can do it that way, or if someone wants to do it, they can do it that way. For me, like the real joy I found in the whole process was like distilling this information into what I thought was the key takeaways.
Yes.
Because what I went from doing was like creating new thoughts, and I don't want to like overextend of what I'm doing, but like I was taking all information and creating something new from it, going into what I did now with the more recent ones, which is I just looked for what I could see was already happening. And I think there's a small difference, like in that I didn't get that moment of joy where I was like, oh, this is actually the story I'm telling. And I think it was always like when I was doing the research, I would put my notes down and I would always think like, I'm not sure exactly like how this comes together and like, what is actually the tactic they're growing here with? For example, they mention influencers in one part, but they mention other things here. It's like, are those related? I'm not sure. And like that moment or like time where I sat down and actually realized, okay, this is the story. Like this is the tactic. I missed that.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna go back to more that style when I do my research, which is like I'm gonna look at a company, just consume what I can, and then figure out what tactic interests me the most. I'm gonna write about that. And so, I mean, I'm not sure when this is gonna go out, but my next deep dive is on, well, actually it's tonight, but the next one is on Arc, which is the browser. And I'm doing that process, which is I'm just listening and consuming and reading as much content as I can from the founder, any growth team, their social medias, any blog articles as I can. And then I'm gonna think of what I think of. Because there's also another issue that I've ran into is it's like there's not many people who talk about the topics I talk about, but there are people who do it. And there's people who do it really well, right? So is this writer, Jared, he's actually also South African, but he lives in New York. And he has this really great newsletter called How They Grow. Honestly, it's way more in depth than something I do. And it's a bit more product focused than growth. It's still focused on growth, but more on the product side of it than like the growth side of it. And he has these awesome deep dives, and it's like probably triple the length of my old ones. So 10,000 words plus. And so if you sit down and read it, it's awesome. But like the time might not be too long. And then there's another one called Strategy Breakdowns, which is by this guy, Tom. It's really good. And he has more like strategy behind it. So yeah, still growth. And what I find is like, I don't want to be skewed by content that's already been created. So what ended up happening with the Zapier one, I'll give you a practical example, is I had seen the strategy. I'm starting to write about it and like research it. And then I'm like halfway through it, like writing the breakdown, and I come across Tom's piece on it. And once you see something else, you can't unsee it. It's like you're always going to think of like structure like that. Like I'm working with someone at the moment who's building a course, like a 7-day crash course with me, right? We're working together to build it. And he was like, he had thought the same. He didn't want to look at other courses because once you see the structure of another course, you can't unsee it. Like you're always going to think. And so I've gone more on the focus is like, I just want to consume as much first-hand content or like first source, so like from the team, the founder, and then only look at secondary sources once I've sort of thought it through.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it just gets to, you can't unsee something and it's unfortunate.
I understand. I feel the same because it influences. It would be, for example, similar if I was doing an episode on a podcast with someone and before I listened to other episodes, then I cannot unremember that and her student obviously influences me. And I was going to say that, if I'm not mistaken, the newsletter is read by some big founders and CEOs from some well-known companies, right?
Yeah, look, I didn't expect it to happen as soon as it did, but yeah, there's some really cool founders, the ones people might know.
For example, Noah, right?
Noah, yeah. So Noah Kagan, the founder of AppSumo, he's a really awesome guy as well. Funny story. So I posted about it on LinkedIn that tomorrow I'm sending out my deep dive on AppSumo, right? And so I see Noah likes my LinkedIn post. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then at the same time, I got a sign up on my newsletter from an email. And I was like, who is this? And I was trying to like look through it and I'm like, this sounds familiar, but I can't exactly tell where it's from. And so I just type in the URL, okay, dork, right? And it redirects to Noah's blog. And I realized, Noah used to call his blog okay, dork.
Oh,
and
wow.
so
I didn't know.
And so that's how I realized, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Then I get an email from Noah, like his personal email now. So not the okay dork one. And he's like, hey, can I get the deep dive? And this is the day before. So I'm like, what do I say? Like, do I give him deep dive early or like, what do I do? So I was like, I just stuck to it. I was like, yeah, hey, Noah, it's coming out tomorrow. I'll make sure you get it. And so the newsletter goes out and within like 10, 15 minutes, Noah replies. He's like, hey, this was like really good. He enjoyed it. And we start speaking for a bit and he puts me in touch with the social media person and he ends up giving me like a behind the scenes look. And I did a guest article, like I wrote an article about the launch of his book, $1 Million Weekend.
Yeah.
So he launched a book and like he had this whole strategy, like launch strategy behind it. And so he asked if I wanted to do like a deep dive on it. And it was something new because I'd only done companies at that point, but I did it, and my audience really liked it. It was one of the most liked, like on the polls episodes.
Yeah.
And two, it was really cool because Noah gave me like all the looks, like the behind the scene look as to here was the strategy of how like they thought about podcasting. Yeah, here was like a list, I don't know, 40 things that worked, 30 things that didn't, things they would try again. Like I got to see all of this, and it was really cool for me because I mean, I don't know if I'll ever release a book, but if I do, I know the strategy. Two, it's like I just got to think about I got to see how he thinks about launch and like go to market and growth, which was also really like invaluable. And it just opened like the connection with me and Noah,
Wow,
which was even more, which was really cool.
That's awesome because I saw it and I was like, how did he achieve that? That's pretty cool. I've been following and subscribing to his newsletter or watching on YouTube. And I've been following the launch before $1 Million Weekend. And I really liked his strategy as well because he's transparent with the numbers, with the strategy, with the campaign, with everything in his newsletter. So it's really cool. And I was very positively surprised that I saw it from you as well.
Yeah. So funny enough, like the newsletter tonight is actually also about Noah, but specifically one tactic, which is how he uses his personal brand to grow AppSumo. So I touched on it with the AppSumo deep dive a little bit, but this is like much more practical now. And I'm also starting to see like, I'm starting to think about the newsletter as how it fits into like my business of doing founder-led marketing. And this is a very practical example of someone who's generating millions for AppSumo because of a personal brand. And so I'm breaking down the tactic like very practically as to how he does it. Like you're saying, open and honest is like one of them. He's like authentic. He builds genuine connections with his fans or like fans, audience, whatever you want to call them, which is great. And so,
are you going to mention tacos in this?
Not this time, but if people look, there is a little taco somewhere along the line. There's a taco, and it's one of the emojis I use, and it's a bit unrelated. But if you know, you would know. And so I have that. But what's really cool is like also about Noah is he reads the newsletter, so I can see this open rate, click rate, which is really cool for me. And the other ones like I'm happy with, and I think people will know. Like there's founders I know that I'm not sure people know, but the ones people know is like, so Austin from Morning Brew, and then actually like just this week, Alex also subscribed. So I don't know if Austin told him, but Austin also reads that content and I know he likes it. So he maybe told Alex, at least that's what I'm telling myself.
And that sounds like a good motivation for you to continue and produce quality content if you know that people like this read it.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't lie though, when I saw Alex subscribed on I think it was on the weekend, on Saturday, I got nervous for this week's episode. I was like, shit, now I have to really deliver. Like this is his first edition. I have to make sure it's good.
There are going to be big expectations.
Exactly. I think it's good. I'm like putting it on myself as well. It's like, this needs to be good.
Yeah,
It's cool. And I think for me, it's like, it shows how I think about it. It's like, the content is there. I just need to think about scaling it. Like, how do I get it to as many people as possible? And that's really been like the core issue I'm struggling with at the moment. The other day, like LinkedIn is a good driver. And the other day I had a post where I spoke about, there were a few posts that I did back to back. One was like about user testimonials, and I used the testimonial from Noah and Stan, like the Stan founder, John and Noah, and Chris Cunningham. He's from ClickUp. He's like one of the founding members. And he also subscribes and he supports me a lot actually on LinkedIn as well. And so I had some posts where I talked about the newsletter and the growth, and then I mentioned Alex and Chris and them, and that got me like 20 or so, 15 to 20 subscribers in a day from one post. Which, look, I think there's a lot of scale still to go, but it's the beginning of my LinkedIn journey, really. Like if you look at it from a grand scheme.
Yeah.
And so if I can scale a way where I can somehow just from LinkedIn get 20 a day, it's like in a year, I mean, it's a sizable amount, right? I mean, it's going to be like what, 730. And so 730, yeah. So it's like, that's decent, right? And then you compound it with other things, like maybe I start posting Twitter, or I use Reddit quite a bit. Like I do post my deep dives on startup or like entrepreneur threads, and those are really hit or miss. Sometimes people love them, and I think it depends who sees them first. Because if people see them first and like it, they comment. But in some subreddits, it's like, this is spam, or like, we want to
Yeah,
talk
it's
about
good.
real entrepreneur issues. And you know what? I know the game I'm playing, so I'm fine if people do that. But there's all these channels, and so if just that scale, I really need to focus on.
Yeah.
And what is cool is like I have a few subscribers who've referred people, which I think is a really good sign. Typically, it's like people are happy. And then also I've been doing like cross promotions, like I've been promoting other newsletters. Like when you sign up to mine, I'm like, hey, I also enjoy these other newsletters. And they're just some of the, like, my friends I've made in the industry, or like newsletters I read, and they do the same for me. And so that's a somewhat consistent. It relies on them being consistent as well. But yeah, it's an interesting space, because especially where I'm, is like in entrepreneurship, it's very high, like high value people in terms of like clicks, like what people pay for clicks, but it's about actually scaling it. Which is the issue.
Sounds like you've got a great plan, good motivation, sounds like a great content. I've been subscribing as well, reading, enjoying, so I can only recommend it. So I'm looking forward to see the progress and where it goes.
Thanks, I really appreciate that.
And just to be aware of time, before we finish, are there any maybe final piece of advice from your journey, or something that you would like to share?
Like, I think there's 2 points here. I have 2 pieces of advice, and people have heard them before, but it's because I've noticed they're true as well. It's like, the first one, I'll give an example for the second one as well, but the first one is like consistency and like showing up for yourself. Like, persistence just matters. I mentioned it a bit earlier, but it really does matter. It just increases your chance of success, of luck happening to you, but it also helps you to get better. So, I mean, the other day I went back and looked at my earlier LinkedIn content. I'm like, I've really improved a lot in these even 90 days, right? And especially the last few days, I've been getting quite a few engagements. Today I had there was an issue and it didn't post my carousel, so I reposted, but I think that was a mistake. But that's another story. The bottom line is, be persistent, right? Like, you'll learn, and you're just increasing the chance people see you. Like, I keep tagging people when I do these posts, like posting on LinkedIn about my newsletter. Not everyone sees them, but then I get the thing of like, Noah sees it or Austin sees it. And it's like, it just means a lot, right? And so be persistent and like show up for yourself every day. The journey isn't 3 months or 6 months. Like, view it as years, and it'll change like your frame of reference. Whereas like, we often overestimate what we can do in a year as people, but like, we underestimate what we can do in 5 or 10. And so you see the bigger picture, where it's like, this is something that, can you do it for 3, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years? And just keep going. Don't think of it as it needs to work within 3 months. Yeah, it's cool if it shows there's progress. I mean, you need to see progress, but it's cool if there's results after 3 months. But don't expect it to be like groundbreaking. It might happen, it might not. But think about the process. Think about long term, and also focus on process goals, not outcome goals. So I want to post 7 days a week, not I want to reach 10,000 people. I want to post one video on YouTube a week for a whole year. Don't say I want to get to 10,000 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers in a year. Like, process you can control, outcome you can't always. The second piece of advice I have, and this is, someone asked me the other day as well, like, what's the one piece of advice, like one common theme you've seen throughout all the newsletters, or like the biggest theme? And for me, it's like customer obsession. Is you just need to be like, I don't want to say like in love, but you need to be obsessed with your customer. Like, for my case, it's readers. For Morning Brew's case, it's readers as well. For AppSumo's case, it's the people who buy the products on AppSumo or the AppSumo Plus. Like, you need to understand deeply what your customers care about, who they care about, what they want to hear, how they like to be spoken to, the language they like to read, like all these different things that you get by repetition, again, on the first point. And this is a big part, is like, just ask your audience. Like, you would be surprised at how willing people are, especially early on, to help or to like give their opinion. These are early adopters. They're going to be a bit different, like a typical customer. And so you see this with startups all the time, and like tech companies, like they have user interviews, they do user research, and that's a great examples. But not everyone's business is like that, right? So you can be an agency, ask your clients, what do they like about it? What don't they like? What could be better? Again, it's these uncomfortable, they might be uncomfortable. And a practical example of what I did is I was doing the longer form newsletters. I just asked my audience. I had a feeling people weren't really reading them all the way. Like, I think people would read a little bit, some people read all the way. So I asked, what would you prefer? The deep dives? Would you prefer shorter ones? Like, how would you prefer it? I asked them to rate, like I did an NPS kind of thing, to rate me, like the content. I did a bunch of things and posted and to show like the power of community, like how much people will actually do it, is like I posted a link on my newsletter in one of the articles and forgot to change the permission sharings on the poll. And like within minutes of me uploading it, I was actually on a flight. So it was scheduled out. Before I'd even landed, like it had gone out just as I was about to land. I just got signal. Like I'd see 2 messages already, like from people who like I think it was like someone replied to the email. One of my friends then who also reads messaged me, and then someone who I don't know. I was in a group with them, like a group chat, and they subscribed. They just reached out because like they actually just care about the content, and they care about what you're doing, and it sometimes feels a bit like surreal. It's like, oh, these people really care about what I'm doing here. But that is the power of like just ask your community, and the results ended up being like 90% in favor of short content, right? So that's how I went down to it. It's like, yes, I like long form content and I like doing it, but at the end of the day, like I am serving people. Like,
yeah, of course,
I'm serving people, and so it's like balancing your vision with how you serve people. And so like then it was about thinking about, for me, how do I balance that with what I want with the results I've got? And the thing is, this is data informed. It's I also like left space for people to comment. So I get all these like sources of reference for my customers, my readers. And yeah, I'd say just listen to your customers, but don't do exactly what they say, because that's how you become a feature factory, or like you look like everyone else. You need to balance your vision with what your customers are saying, because they don't necessarily always see the full picture, nor do they know necessarily what you want to do. And so like balancing what they say, if it fits in, great. If it doesn't, how do you make it fit in?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like it.
Those would be my
two pieces. It will be perfect piece to advise to finish with, but also, although we spoke about it, but where can people follow you, where can find you, and subscribe to the newsletter?
Yeah, the newsletter, you can go to the0to1.co. So it's the .co, not .com. And then you can find me, probably the best place is on LinkedIn. My name is Sheldon Bishop. It's probably the best place. I think it's my @ on LinkedIn as well. On Twitter, I think it's like Sheldon Bishop 14 or something. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place.
And everything will be in the show notes. So
exactly. Sheldon, and also the newsletter, if you respond, I respond to every newsletter, like everyone who responds to me. So if you subscribe, send me a message, tell me you came from the podcast, and I'll say hey.
We will test it. But Sheldon, I want to say a big thank you. It was a pleasure. As we said before, I feel like I've known you for a long time, thanks to LinkedIn, but it was great to get to know you more. I appreciate you joining me. Wish you good luck, and we'll be happy to catch up anytime in the future again.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on. And like, I've been listening to your work for a while now, and I'm glad I finally could come on here and talk to you and share with everyone.
Thanks for listening to Produced By with Tommen. Check out show notes for all the links, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your feedback. Speak soon.